It's the Midwatch, and we're rigged for red. Let's tell a story. So, when I left the Henry Clay, it would have been in 1981, early. I think we ended up pulling in February, and I had put in to go to school. The policy was if you were on the boat and you didn't go dink and you got qualified submarines and you did a good job as a non-rate, you could put in to go to an A school. And I decided I wanted to be a missile tech. So my test scores were high enough, so they processed me, they cut me a set of orders, and they sent me off to Dam Neck, Virginia. And it starts out with Swiss School, which is SWS. And it didn't take me but about 4 days into that school to know that I was completely, absolutely out of my league with the math that they were trying to pump me up to. I had basic algebra in high school, didn't finish the 11th grade. Hello? Yeah, well, they were into calculus by the end of the first week, and I was completely and absolutely out of my league. Now, I'd seen what missile techs do on a submarine, and it didn't look like it had anything to do with any of this. Maybe the FTBs, this was like a primer school for FTB, NavET, and missile techs. Missile techs were just knuckle draggers, kind of like torpedomen, except the weapons were bigger. So anyway, I ended up going to TMA school, but that's a different story. But anyway, I was at Dam Neck, and the duty that I was standing was at a barracks. And it was the barracks that everybody checked into. So again, it was one of those mid-watch stories, and I was there, and I was the rover, and the guy who was there behind the desk would crash out in a bunk room. He was on 24-hour duty, and although we were on a 24-hour duty status, I would show up and stand one 6-hour watch. So the 6-hour watch I was standing was from midnight till 6 in the morning, and about 2:30 that morning, this guy walks into the lobby of the barracks, and he's got, a package, it looks like orders. He's wearing a pea coat, and it's February and it's starting to snow, and this guy comes in and he's cold and looks kind of wet, and he's got on a Dixie cup and in his pea coat. He looks like a non-rate, no stripes on the sleeve kind of thing, and he walks in and he comes up to the desk, and I'm sitting there in the lobby. I'm in between rounds. And he says, I need to see the duty petty officer, I'm checking in. And I said, okay, not a problem. So I go behind the desk and I knock on the bunk room door. And this guy's kind of foul when he woke up, just didn't want to be bothered. Anyway, I woke him up, and he comes out wearing a t-shirt and his dungaree pants. And he's like kind of pissed off. And so he comes out and he looks at this guy and says, what do you want? He says, well, I'm checking in. And the guy says, well, it's 2:30 in the morning. And the guy's like, yeah, I just got here. I'm checking in. And this guy's a second class, and he's, kind of putting on his shirt, and he's buttoning up. He says, well, when are you supposed to be here? And the guy says, well, I'm a couple days early, and that's where this guy stopped him. He says, you're a couple days early? He says, why don't you haul ass and go stay in a hotel or something and not bother me at 2:30 in the morning where I got to sign you a room and all this. Anyway, he starts to kind of go off on the guy. It's kind of like, damn, show up in the middle of the night, who the hell do you think you are, sort of thing. And when he got to the who the hell you are sort of thing, that's when this guy was undoing his pea coat. He takes his pea coat off and he kind of sets it on the back of a chair. He turns back around, and he's a second class engineman. And that's not what's important. What's important is that he's wearing 4 ribbons, and the one on top is powder blue with 5 white stars on it. And the other 3 all have V for Valors on them. He's got a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, and a Navy Achievement Medal, and they all have a V for Valor, and he's got the Medal of Honor. So he says to this guy, and this guy's looking at him, he's like, I didn't, and he said, well, I'll tell you what. He says, because you were so nice to me as I was trying to check in, why don't you call the duty officer and invite him over here to meet me? And this guy's like, he said, this, and he touches his Medal of Honor, and he's got the big trident above it too. He's a Navy SEAL. He's not checking into our school. He's checking into the other command that happens to be on Dam Neck with us, and he needs a room for the night before he gets and checks in his command. So he says, this means I get to meet anybody I want when I get to a command. Call your duty officer now. So this guy, gets on the phone. He calls up. The duty officer is actually a chief, and the chief petty officer shows up, and he's there, and he's like, Engineman, I can't remember the guy's name, but just say it's Johnson. Engineman Johnson, we knew you were coming. We expected you in the morning. And he says, yeah. He says, I got here early, so I decided to drive down. And he says, I got here. He says, I asked for room. I wasn't going to bother anybody, until I got here. He says, but this young man was so nice to me, he basically told me to go fuck myself and go get a hotel room, that he couldn't be bothered. And he says, well, that's not how this is going to go. And the duty officer's like, oh, no, we got it. He says, no, as is my right and privilege having this, he said, I'd like you to inform the commanding officer that tomorrow, at his convenience, I'd like to inspect his command. And the duty officer was like, really? And the guy's like, yeah. He said, that's kind of how this works. He says, not being a dick or nothing, but, he said, and tell the captain it's at his convenience. He'll tell me what time. He says, I'm sure he's familiar with how this works. And the duty officer's like, you gotta be kidding me. And the guy's like, no. And the duty officer's like, no problem. I'll do that. So off he goes. By now it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and they got this guy a bedroll, and they got him some keys. And this second class is like, oh, I'm sorry, dude. I didn't know. I'm sorry, dude. I'm so sorry. I didn't. Petty officer, I didn't know. And the guy's like, oh no, it's no problem. He says, but everybody's gonna know that you're a dick to people when they check in. And he says, and I'm sure we can fix this. He says, this is what's known as an attitude adjustment. So I get off duty at 6 o'clock in the morning. I didn't see this guy, again the rest of the night or anything, but at 11 o'clock the next morning, the whole command turned out. We went to full quarters on the street. Everybody's out there, and this guy came out, and the captain saluted him to start out. That's how that works with the Medal of Honor. The commanding officer of the station in 06 saluted him. He salutes back, and they take a walk around, and each division's in their own set of ranks, and we're down off in the transient division, because I actually hadn't started school yet there. But we're down there, and this guy just walks by and says, well, Captain, thank you very much. And he puts his hand out, and him and the captain shake hands. He says, I really appreciate your time. And he says, but he said, this is a problem that needed to get corrected, and I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else checking in. He said, basically, when I travel, he says, I don't like to, to push this. I don't like to be, any kind of a dick or anything. But this guy he was a jerk to me, because he just thought I was a non-rate, that I was nobody. And he said he should be treating nobody in our Navy just the same as he would as a guy with the Medal of Honor when he checks in on your command. Don't you agree? And the captain says, absolutely. And we're going to fix this. And I remember the guy's name that checked him in, because he was one of the instructors for the beginning school when you got there. And he was a second class FTB, and he almost became a third class FTB over this, and it was not a real happy time for him. But I ended up spending about a total of 4 weeks at Dam Neck, and I put a request sheet in. I went to as soon as I started school, I realized I was in over my head, and there was just no way that I was going to make it through. So I started attending night school right away. I went and checked myself into night school, and they were like, you haven't failed a test yet. You don't need to be at night school. And I'm like, but I'm going to fail a test, and there's no way I can get through this. This is way over my head. And, I got dolphins. I'm a Seaman Fleet returnee. So I absolutely knew there was no way I was going to make it through this. And they said, well, we'll get you a tutor, and and I said, okay, that's great. And they did. And it turns out I was right. I'm a rock. I'm not mathematically inclined at all. I mean, I can't even balance my checkbook today. So, and my wife does that for me. Hi, baby. But it is what it is. So I put a request sheet in to go to TMA school, because I wanted to stay in weapons department. I wanted to do that. And although that's rather slightly unusual, they approved my chit. They got me orders to Orlando, and off I went down to TMA school. So the point of this story, though, is you don't know who you meet when you meet them. and this guy was just trying to check in incognito, and it turns out he was a Navy SEAL, and he saved the life of a couple guys. He dragged one guy back, inflated a Kapok life jacket, and swam with him for like 2 or 3 miles or something in Vietnam, and pulled him back ashore after their plane crashed. And the lieutenant that he saved got the Medal of Honor too. And I think it was the only time that two guys got the Medal of Honor together. But he saved this other guy's life, and he was in rehab for a long time, but he was on his way back, returning to active duty, and he was checking into the place on Dam Neck where they have a swimming pool at their command. Wink, wink. And he had that big trident on, so it was kind of obvious, who he was and what he was doing. But that's it. And I heard that he retired from the Navy as lieutenant commander or something, many years later. But in 1981, he was returning back to full active duty after having been on rehab for a long time. And there he was at Dam Neck, saying hello as he checked in. So I know this one's been kind of short. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed telling it to you. Have a great Navy day. And for now, I'm out.